It's time now for County-Wide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Brad Miller as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives here in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's County-Wide.
Welcome to County-Wide. I'm Paul David. Good to have you in studio today. We've got a great show lined up for you. If you're listening on the radio, we're going to do our best to describe what it is we're talking about today, but you're definitely going to want to go to our website and check out today's show. I've got Lon Wolf and Jim Warbasse from the FortTuthill Military Museum in Flagstaff in studio again today. Morning, guys.
Good morning, Paul.
Always good to see you. You always bring such neat stuff here. Before we get to the stuff that we've got on the counter we're going to talk about today, these are new additions to the museum, and there's really some interesting, Lon's got some interesting information about some of the weaponry we have here today. Real quick, I want, Jim, if you could just give us a quick background on Fort Tuthill. A real quick background.
Fort Tuthill, beginning in the late 1920s until the advent of World War II in the late 1930s, was the regimental training facility for the 158th Infantry Regiment, Arizona National Guard. And the regiment traces its roots back to 1865. But Fort Tuthill was at that time, from the 20s to when the unit left for World War II, was one of the few National Guard training facilities across the United States that was solely for the purpose of the National Guard unit. In those days, most National Guard units across the United States trained at active Army bases, or in many cases they would simply go out into the boondocks and train. Fort Tuthill was unique and for its time, and it's as a permanent field training facility with permanent buildings and permanent rifle range and various other things necessary for the regiment to train. It was picked because it was in Flagstaff, and many of the units were from southern Arizona. And of course, in the August in southern Arizona, it's the heat makes it pretty difficult to do what they needed to do up here. So they came to Flagstaff and established the base there, and it was used prior to World War II, and then when the regiment came back after World War II, it was used as a training facility from 47 and 48. But they soon found out that on their return from World War II, not only did they come back as a larger unit personnel-wise, but the technology of the weaponry of World War II was such that the capability of the weapons outranged and were too much for the range capacity of the old Fort Tuthill. Mm-hmm. So they had to move their training to Fort Huachuca. We came into the picture in the late 90s, petitioning the county for one of the buildings to use as a museum to memorialize the history of this famous regiment. And
what made you decide to do that?
Well, I was a member of the regiment in the 50s, and I was, along with a lot of other new second lieutenants, I was sent back to Fort Benning, Georgia, to what they call the Basic Infantry Officer course, where you're instructed as to how to be a platoon leader of infantry. And at a uniform function that I was attending along with four other of my other fellows from the 158th, we were off by ourselves, keeping a low profile as brand new second lieutenants normally do, and a major approached us from across the room, a very bemedaled major, huge big old guy. I remember him to this day, and I was on the outside of the group, so he came to me and he said, "Lieutenant, I saw your patch from across the room." The patch he referred to was the Bushmaster patch, which was a Bushmaster snake coiled around a jungle machete, a patch that had become very famous in World War II. And he said, "I just wanted to tell you," I won't use the adjectives he used, but he said, that was a heck of an outfit. He said, "We fought along you guys, it wasn't me, but he said, we fought along you guys along the De Mortis Rosario Road into Manila. And he left me with the comment, you can be very proud to wear that patch. So that stuck in my mind for all these years, and about in 1996, I began petitioning the county for the use of one building to turn into a museum to memorialize the history of the unit, and in particular the combat history of the unit in World War II, which is really where the unit became most famous as the 158th Regimental Combat Team. And they fought all through New Guinea and the South Pacific and the Philippines. They were considered one of the finest regimental combat teams in the United States Army. And in fact, they did so well that they were selected as one of 2 units to spearhead the invasion of Japan. And that invasion force was going to ultimately be about 1,800,000. And our losses were estimated to be in excess of 1 million.
Wow.
Their particular objective was going to be a small island off the coast of Japan with an equal number of Japanese troops and maybe 80,000 to 100,000 armed civilians. And so it was essentially a suicide mission, which unfortunately they didn't have to perform, but they were picked for that particular mission along with one other unit, the 40th Division, because of their combat record in World War II. So anyway, that's in a nutshell is kind of how it started, and the rationale behind.
It's a big nut, Jim.
Behind the what we're doing now.
Yeah. Well, it's spectacular. I've been there a couple of times, and it's truly amazing the amount of stuff you have inside the building at Fort Tuthill. And I told you guys as you got here today that I had somebody this morning say I didn't think I could go back in there because it's a military base. But that's not the case. And we really want the public to know that the Fort Tuthill Military Museum is open to the public all spring, summer long. It closes down the fall and winter, but it's open, and you guys have done a tremendous job in there with the stuff that you've brought in, this memorabilia. And it starts all the way back prior to Arizona becoming a state, correct?
Yes, yeah. 1865.
1865.
First Arizona volunteers were formed up with the idea of helping to protect civilians in areas out away from communities where there was no law in those days, because the law enforcement was left up to the Army at that time. And of course, in 1865, all of the federal troops were back east fighting in the Civil War. So there really wasn't much in the way of police protection out here. And the governor of Arizona felt like they needed some sort of protection for miners, ranchers, and other people living in the outlying areas. So that accounted for the formation of the first Arizona Volunteers.
And that's where the museum goes back to.
That's where we start our story.
And it comes up, it goes through what? Up until present day? Yes,
it goes all the way through the present day. We currently have a battalion that's called the 158th Infantry that has been to Afghanistan and currently has some volunteers from that organization serving with other units in Afghanistan right now. Mm-hmm. So the history of the unit is continuing through this contemporary organization, and we're always adding history from this period as well. So the story continues. If you came in and saw it last year, we've probably got a few more details this year than we had last year on some of this stuff.
I can't imagine being able to go in there one time and actually seeing everything you have in the museum in there. It truly is amazing how much stuff is in there. I was telling you before the show, I think you could actually spend an entire day in there and probably still not see everything, just with all the information that you guys have put together to describe each and every picture. You've got dioramas in there. You've got the weaponry obviously in there. It's really amazing. We have to take a break already. Lon Wolf and Jim Warbasse are in studio from the Fort Tuthill Military Museum. They're opening this weekend, so you definitely want to take time out this summer, this spring, to go visit the Fort Tuthill Military Museum. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Here in northern Arizona and throughout Yavapai County, people count on Orkin Pest Control. With over 100 years of combined experience, nobody knows how to protect your home or your business from harmful or annoying pests like the Orkin Man. To start service, contact your Northern Arizona Orkin Pest Control. In the Verde Valley, call 567-5100 or Orkin Pest Control in the Prescott area at 775-8772.
Hi, I'm Steve Scourge with Yavapai Silent Witness. Marcel Gonzalez was murdered on this spot almost 15 years ago, back in March of 1997. We know that there is somebody out there who knows what happened in the alley that night. Yavapai Silent Witness is offering an $11,000 cash reward for information that leads to the arrest of Marcel's killer. For Yavapai Silent Witness, I'm Steve Scourge.
The pain will not control us. It will never break us, define us, or keep us still. Because arthritis can't beat us if we beat it first. In the fight against arthritis, you need a weapon. What's yours? Visit the Arthritis Foundation at fightarthritispain.org.
Getting closer to nature can get you closer to your family. Go to discovertheforest.org.
Welcome back to the program. It's Countywide. I'm Paul David, Lon Wolf, and Jim Warbasse from the Fort Tuthill Military Museum. It's located in the Coconino County Fairgrounds. So if you're heading north on 89A, it's right there as you turn left in the Coconino County Fairgrounds. If you're on northbound I-17, the Pulliam Airport exit, of course, you can slide right into the Coconino County Fairgrounds. And there's signs that guide you all the way. It's all the way in the back of Fort Tuthill, but it is open to the public. It's not just for military personnel. It's open for the public. Jim mentioned that he's going to be needing some volunteers. A number to call, 602-320-8338. Also, the museum opens Saturday, May 5th. That's this Saturday at 10 a.m. There'll be a flag-raising ceremony. We'll hit more on that towards the end of the show. But you brought all this neat stuff in that you just acquired for the museum, and I really want to get to this today because it's very interesting. Lon, you were talking about how, I guess a lot of this is the Japanese conflict. This is German.
All right, that's German.
Okay. Where do you want to start? Should we start here?
Well, I can start
the big guy
on
in the middle
that.
of the desk?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
This, we recently received this as a donation from a gentleman in Kachina Village.
What is it?
It is a German MG-42 light machine gun. And during World War II, and probably to this day, it has the fastest cyclic rate of fire of 1,500 rounds per minute of any infantry weapon in anybody's arsenal. It was used extensively by the Germans, and one of the things about the German infantry doctrine that is different from ours is that the German infantry, their mission was designed tactically to protect this particular machine gun because of its very high rate of fire and its tactical capability and its psychological input on the soldiers who were on the receiving end of this fire.
I can imagine.
In fact, the United States Army put out a training film for all soldiers going to the European theater who might face this, which not only dealt with the possible tactics to defeat the weapon, but also with the psychology that the soldier had to adjust to in order to face it. I talked to a young soldier from the 158th Infantry who is going to be helping us with a weapons display this weekend, and he was in Afghanistan, and he actually fired this MG-42 because the Italian army, which was they were serving adjacent to an Italian unit, actually has this weapon. So he actually had a chance to fire this weapon, but it is now still used by some armies. But it is a potentially a very, it's a game changer. Let's put it that way.
I would imagine so. Let's switch so we've got time to talk about everything. And then, Lon, you brought in a couple of rifles here.
These are Japanese infantryman rifles from World War II.
Talking about
it's called an Arisaka.
Okay.
It's basically a .32 caliber weapon. Early in the war, particularly during the invasion of China by the Japanese, they had done a pretty good job of machining these, putting these together. It's one of the strongest bolt action rifles in the world. Very reliable. But by the time 1943 rolled around and a lot of the Japanese supply lines had been compromised and a lot of their resources were starting to run out, the Japanese had to change the way they had been doing their manufacturing. So instead of having large complexes in major cities, a lot of the building of weapons and other war material were farmed out to individual homes to make them less of an easy target. But as a result, the expertise went away, and the individuals in some of these homes didn't have the metalworking expertise or the woodworking expertise to keep up with what was required in the early weapons.
So real quick,
and these became much cruder. The sights are cruder on this, the butt plate's cruder, and they're just not nearly the quality of the early era sockets. These were called last-ditch weapons.
I was going to say, I was going to talk real quick while you were talking, was that I've switched the rifle now. I've gone from the one that started out at the beginning of the Japanese part of the conflict, and now I'm holding up the one towards the end.
Correct.
And so on this one, the later version, what kind of differences do we see here?
Well, if you look at the sights, that's a much cruder sight. So the rear sight on this particular weapon, the front sight the same way, just a basic post, nothing fancy, no dog ears or anything to protect it.
I notice it's missing the wood stock. That's
the forestock is missing on this one. A little less wood went into the manufacture. The butt plate on this one is wood that's just nailed on to the stock, as opposed to the metal fabricated butt plate on the other era socket. So a lot of changes in manufacturing technique, much cruder, much simpler weapon started to evolve by 1943.
That's fascinating. On the newer one, you can tell that this was hand carved.
Right.
Where this is definitely machine carved.
Correct.
So yeah,
a lot of changes.
They farmed it out, and then you brought a couple of bayonets, and those are really interesting.
These are the same kind of thing we were just talking about.
No, but these attached to the air socket?
These would attach to the front end of the air socket, turn it into a fancy spear. This particular bayonet was one of the early ones. Metal sheath that took a lot of understanding of metal working and machining techniques. The bayonet itself is a little bit more sophisticated in that it has this tang to it that allows the infantryman to engage another enemy's weapon and hook this thing into the other weapon and hopefully yank it away from the fellow he was fighting. The machining is much more sophisticated on this one. A lot more things are going on. It's a more highly polished
It's far more detail too.
Right. As opposed to this one, the sheath is now two pieces of wood that are held together with cotton twine, has some cheap stamped metal end cap. The fancy little swirl is gone off of the bayonet. The end is now square and straight, something that could be done with a milling file rather than a lathe or a milling machine. Much less sophisticated bayonet than the earlier models.
Neat. And then Jim, we got about a minute before we have to take another break. You want to tell us a little bit about this bazooka? I'll hold it up for you.
This was a 2.36-inch rocket launcher, and it was called a bazooka. It was named after a comedian named Bob Burns, and he played a musical instrument called a bazooka, so the GIs named this a bazooka. You loaded this particular round into the rear, and there were two wires on the back of the projectile which fastened into these two contact points, and when you fired the bazooka, then the electrical charge passed here and set the igniter off, and this round then passed this way. This was initially thought to be a situation that would solve problems with German armor, and however they found out pretty early in the war that if you didn't hit the armor in just the right spot, it really just bounced off. But it was also used for point targets such as pillboxes and things like that, and it gave the infantrymen of those days a armor-penetrating weapon to some degree, but it was very effective against bunkers and pillboxes where you could put one of these rounds through the firing aperture in the pillbox and do quite a lot of damage inside.
Let's take a break.
Yeah.
Jim Warbasse, Lon Wolf in studio today from FortTuthill Military Museum. It's right in this Coconino County Fairgrounds. I'm Paul David. Stick around. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Here in northern Arizona and throughout Yavapai County, people count on Orkin Pest Control. With over 100 years of combined experience, nobody knows how to protect your home or your business from harmful or annoying pests like the Orkin Man. To start service, contact your northern Arizona Orkin Pest Control. In the Verde Valley, call 567-5100 or Orkin Pest Control in the Prescott area at 775-8772.
Talk to your kids about the dangers of prescription drug abuse. The partnership at drugfree.org.
Hi, I'm Steve Scourge with Yavapai Silent Witness. Marcel Gonzalez was murdered on this spot almost 15 years ago, back in March of 1997. We know that there is somebody out there who knows what happened in the alley that night. Yavapai Silent Witness is offering an $11,000 cash reward for information that leads to the arrest of Marcel's killer. For Yavapai Silent Witness, I'm Steve Scourge.
Found out very early on that this
Every year, 2 million kids play doctor by taking pills not prescribed to them. Talk to your kids about the dangers of prescription drug abuse. The partnership at drugfree.org.
Welcome back to Countywide. We've got just a couple minutes left of the program. We do want to stress how important it is. The Fort Tuthill Military Museum is going to be open. It's opening this Saturday on May 5th at 10 a.m. You've got a special event going on for this as well.
Yeah, we do, Paul. We have a flag-raising ceremony at 10 o'clock with the NAU Army ROTC, supported by the Coconino County or Coconino High School Junior ROTC. And then all day long, C Company, 1st Battalion, 158th Infantry, will have a weapons display, which will include an up-armored Humvee with a 50 caliber machine gun. One of the most interesting displays will be the Raven battlefield reconnaissance drone. And this is a small drone which is now capable of giving battlefield reconnaissance to the infantry company commander. And we'll also have machine guns and grenade launchers and various other things. The soldiers will be there to talk about them and in detail. So this is a chance for people to come out and not only see history, the weapons of the history of the wars, but also see the current infantry weapons that are carried by our troops today.
Mm-hmm. Saturday, May 5th. 10 a.m. That's this coming Saturday. You're also looking for volunteers.
We badly need volunteers. They're basically Lon and I, with a couple of other folks who help when they can, are pretty much it. And we are attempting to grow the museum, and we've had success in that regard. But in order to continue our growth in the pattern we like, we do need help, and we're very flexible. You can help us whatever hours that you want to work and when you want to work. It's not a hard job, but it's an interesting job. And if you like people and you like history, we hope you'll give us a call.
Okay, and that number is 602-320-8338. Guys, thanks for coming in. Lon Wolf, Jim Warbasse, good luck this year. Hope a lot of people show up. I'm Paul David. That's today's Countywide. We'll talk to you again next time.
This has been Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Listen in each Tuesday and Thursday as we tackle the hot topics and talk to the decision makers across Yavapai County. That's Countywide with Brad Miller and Paul David each Tuesday and Thursday on this Yavapai Broadcasting station.